At my son's wedding dinner, my husband of 32 years stood up, looked me straight in the eye, and said the words that turned my world inside out. "This is the end for us, Monica. I found someone new." Every sound in the room vanished. Forks froze mid-air, laughter died mid-sentence, and all 40 guests turned to stare at me, the woman being quietly erased from her own family table. Across from me sat his secretary, Tessa Grant, wearing a deep red dress and a smile that could cut glass. Her lipstick matched her confidence, and the way she met my eyes told me everything. She thought she had won. My son Tyler, sitting beside his new wife Olivia, looked lost, confused, caught between the joy of his wedding and the shock of his father's cruelty. He reached for my hand under the table, but I didn't move. I just breathed, instead of crying or screaming or throwing my glass, like people might have expected. I leaned forward and said calmly, "Well, Gerald, thank you for the heads up." Before we continue, if you haven't subscribed yet, do so to stay up to date with the most shocking and real stories happening around you. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid it across the white tablecloth toward him. My hands were steady. "A little something for you to read later," I said. Gerald blinked confused, his arrogance faltering for the first time that night. I smoothed the front of my navy dress, the one I'd bought for this beautiful day, and kissed Tyler on the forehead. "Congratulations, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm proud of you." Then I turned and walked out of the reception hall with my head held high behind me. I heard the faint rustle of paper as Gerald tore open the envelope. A moment later came the sound I will never forget, a guttural scream that silenced the entire banquet hall. Gasps followed, chairs scraped. Someone dropped a wine glass, but I didn't turn around. That scream was not mine anymore. It belonged to him. People often ask me later, "Monica, how did you not see it coming?" The truth is, I saw everything. I just chose to believe in the man I married instead of the man he had become. When I met Gerald Harris in 1992, I was 26 and running a small bakery out of my apartment kitchen called Sweet Haven. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I dreamed of opening a little storefront on Main Street where people would stop in for coffee and peach cobbler, where I could make a living doing what I loved. Gerald came in one day to order cupcakes for his office party. He had this confidence about him, the kind that made you believe he had everything figured out. By the time he finished his coffee, he had my number a year later. He had my heart. We married the next summer, full of plans and promises. "We'll build a life together," he told me. "You'll have that bakery someday. I'll make sure of it." But a few months later, his company offered him a promotion in Portland. "Just a few years," he said. "Once we're settled, you can start again." So I sold my ovens, packed my grandmother's recipe books, and followed him, believing love meant compromise. Years passed. We bought a small house, then had our son Tyler, my day. This became about diapers, dinners, and doing the books. For Gerald's growing insurance career, I told myself my time would come once Tyler started school, but life kept moving the goalposts. There was always another bill, another project, another excuse. When Gerald's firm hit a rough patch, I took a job at a local credit union. To help with expenses, I worked long hours, balancing other people's accounts while balancing our own. At night, my steady income, my good credit, my name on every document. That was how his business survived those years. But he never said thank you. He acted like it was simply my duty. I told myself this was what marriage was. Two people building something together, even if one dream had to sleep while the other grew. But that dream of mine, Sweet Haven, never really died. It just waited. When Tyler graduated college, I thought maybe it was finally time. Over dinner, I said gently, "I've been thinking about reopening my bakery." Gerald didn't even look up from his phone. "At your age," he said with a laugh, "you should relax. Besides, I might need your help at the office. Tessa could use someone who understands numbers." That was the first time I heard her name spoken. In our home, the woman who had become my husband's undoing, and unknowingly mine too. It started with something small, an envelope that didn't belong in our regular stack of mail, a Chase Sapphire card issued under Gerald's name, with a balance of nearly 8,000 talentuns. I knew every card we had, every account we shared, every cent that came in or went out. This one was new. The transactions were like breadcrumbs, leading straight to betrayal, dinner at a high-end restaurant, 2 towns over a weekend stay at a luxury resort, a jewelry store I'd never heard of, and not a single charge connected to his business. When I confronted him that evening, he barely looked up from his laptop. "Business expenses, honey," he said in that dismissive tone he used when he wanted to shut me down. "Client dinners, networking, Patricia handles reimbursements. I blin." "Ked Patricia," he smiled slightly. "My secretary. You've met her." No, I hadn't. And her name wasn't Patricia. Her name was Tessa Grant. That night after he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table under the dim light and stared at the statement for hours. 30 years at a credit union had taught me something vital. Numbers never lie. They tell the story people try to hide. So I started digging, using the same skills that had once saved his business. I traced those charges. Within a week, I found transfers from our joint savings to a separate account at a different bank, small amounts, $500 here, $800 there, spread out over 18 months. Each transfer LED to the same account number. The account holder name stopped me cold. Gerald Harris and Tessa Grant. It was like the air left the room. I checked the total $45,312. Our money, our future spent on her. I found proof of everything. Receipts for weekend getaways, a diamond bracelet, charged 3 weeks before our anniversary, a lease agreement for an apartment downtown, under Tessa's name. All of it paid for by the man who once told me we couldn't afford to upgrade our kitchen. I printed every page, logged every transaction, and photographed each piece of evidence. By the time the sun came up, a neat stack of papers sat beside my coffee cup, a silent monument to 32 years of misplaced trust. For a moment I wanted to storm into his office and throw the papers in his face, but instead I felt something colder, steadier begin to settle inside me. It wasn't heartbreak anymore, it was clarity. He thought I'd never find out. He thought I was too naive to follow the trail. He forgot who balanced his books for 3 decades. My first instinct was to confront him, to scream, to demand an explanation, but then I remembered who Gerald was, the man who always underestimated me. He thought of me as dependable Monica, the woman who never raised her voice, who kept things running while he played the role of provider. So I decided to use that image to my advantage. A week later, while organizing old tax files in our home office, I stumbled across a thick folder labeled Prenup Agreement. I hadn't looked at it since the day I signed it. 2 years ago, Gerald had insisted on it back then, still bitter from his first divorce. He told me it's just a precaution. Monica smart planning, nothing to worry about. I'd believed him. That night, curiosity turned into revelation. I opened the folder and began reading line by line, and there it was buried on page 23, a clause titled Faithfulness Provision. It stated that if either party engaged in adultery, during the marriage, all asset protections became void. Everything. His company, his investments, even the house. I sat back in my chair, staring at those words until the letters blurred. The next morning I called my old college roommate, Sarah Blake, now one of the top family attorneys in the state. When she picked up, her voice softened immediately. "Monica, it's been years. Are you okay?" "I need legal advice," I said quietly. And absolute confidentiality. Within 24 hours, I was sitting across from her in her downtown office, the folder open between us, as Sarah read, her eyebrows lifted higher and higher. Finally she looked up. "Do you realize what you have here?" "A prenup that protects his assets," I guessed. She smiled slightly. "A prenup that destroys them. If you can prove adultery, Monica, everything flips in your favor. That clause voids his entire protection plan." I reached into my bag and handed her the manila folder, filled with printed bank statements, transfers, and photos. Her eyes widened. "This is more than enough, but you must file first quietly. Don't give him time to hide anything." That night I didn't sleep, not because I was angry, but because I was awake. For the first time in years, Gerald thought he was planning a future with another woman. He didn't realize I was already planning his reckoning. For the next 6 weeks, I became an actress in my own home. Every morning, I made Gerald's coffee just the way he liked it, 2 sugars, a dash of cream, and kissed him on the cheek before he left for work. Every evening I asked about his day and listened to his lies about late meetings and client dinners. I smiled when he came home, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny, and I pretended not to notice when he turned his phone face down at the dinner table. Inside I was silent fire. Each lie he told added another brick to the wall. I was building between us a wall of evidence, timing, and patience. Sarah had filed my divorce papers, but I instructed her to hold the official service until after Tyler's wedding. I refused to let my son's happiness be tainted by Gerald's ugliness. Let him have his moment, because what came next would be mine. 3 days before the ceremony, Gerald made his final mistake. We were having dinner when he cleared his throat and said, "Monica, there's something about the reception." I looked up with my best imitation of curiosity. "What about it?" He hesitated, then smiled. "I invited Tessa. She's been such a big help with the business. It's only right that she's there to celebrate." The audacity nearly made me laugh. He was bringing his mistress to our son's wedding and wanted my approval. Old Monica might have cried or argued, but the woman sitting across from him simply smiled. "Of course," I said, "she deserves to be there." He blinked, surprised by how easily I agreed. Then he smirked, mistaking my composure for defeat. "I knew you'd understand that night." After he fell asleep, I laid out the navy blue dress I'd chosen weeks ago. Next to it sat the manila envelope, my silent weapon. Inside were copies of the divorce papers, the financial records, and the prenup clauses that would strip him of everything. I practiced my expression in the mirror, calm and unshaken, on the morning of Tyler's wedding. I woke before sunrise. As I zipped up my dress and pinned my hair, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Gerald thought he was walking into a celebration. He didn't. No, he was walking straight into his own downfall. The reception hall at Riverside Manor sparkled with golden lights and soft music. Everyone looked so happy, Tyler radiant beside Olivia, our families laughing, the scent of roses in the air. If anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed that my smile never quite reached my eyes, because I knew what was coming. When the dinner plates were cleared, Gerald stood up, his champagne glass in hand. He tapped it lightly with a fork, the clear ring echoing across the room. "Excuse me, everyone," he began, smiling. That confident smile I used to find charming. "I have an announcement to make." The room fell silent. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward him, expecting a toast to the bride and groom, but instead he looked directly at me. "After 32 years, he said, "Monica and I have decided to go our separate ways. I've met someone new." He gestured toward Tessa seated across from me, who lifted her glass with a smirk. The world seemed to stop moving. Gasp, whispers, a dropped fork somewhere down the table. Tyler's face went pale. "Dad, what are you doing?" But I raised my hand slightly, signaling him to stay seated. I didn't need saving, not anymore. I leaned forward, calm as ever, and said softly, "Well, Gerald, thank you for the heads up." Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope. I slid it across the white tablecloth toward him. "Something for you to read later." He frowned, confused, and tore it open. The first thing he saw was the divorce petition, filed that very morning, then the bank records, then the photographs, and finally page 23 of the prenup, the faithfulness clause. The color drained from his face. He flipped through the pages faster and faster, breathing heavy. Tessa leaned over, whispering, "What is it?" Gerald didn't answer. He just stared, panic flooding his eyes. Then the inevitable happened. A raw, furious scream tore through the room. Guests turned in shock as he shouted, she knew everything." I stood up slowly, smoothed my dress and walked toward the door. The crowd parted around me. Behind me I heard Tess. Sar's trembling voice. "You said she'd never fight back." I smiled as I stepped into the cool night air. That scream wasn't pain. It was justice. "Monica," Gerald's voice echoed through the parking lot behind me, cracking with panic. "Get back here, we need to talk." I stopped, turned slowly and faced the reception hall, glowing behind him. Through the tall windows, I could still see the chaos he'd created. Overturned chairs, guests whispering, my son frozen in disbelief. Gerald looked nothing like the man who'd strutted to that microphone. Minutes earlier, his tie was crooked, his face blotchy, his confidence gone. When I stepped back into the room, everyone fell silent. You could feel the tension, heavy as glass about to shatter. I walked straight to our table. "You wanted to talk," I said evenly. "So talk." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You can't do this, not in front of everyone." I raised an eyebrow. "You chose the audience, Gerald. I just gave them the ending." Tyler rose from his seat, his voice shaking. "Mum, is it true you filed for divorce?" I nodded softly. "I did, sweetheart. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but your father made that choice, the moment he humiliated me here." "This is vindictive," Gerald snapped. "You're trying to ruin me." I reached into my purse and pulled out the bank statements. "You already did that yourself. You stole from our savings to fund your affair." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. My sister covered her mouth. Olivia's parents stared at the floor. Right then the doors opened and Sarah Blake walked in, calm and composed in her grey suit. "Mr. Harris," she said smoothly, "that clause you signed 32 years ago means your wife now holds claim to nearly everything you own." Gerald's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at me, desperate, defeated. "You can't take it all." I met his eyes for the last time. "Watch me." Then I turned and walked out again, this time for good. 6 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of my new bakery, the sign above the window reading, "Sweet Haven Re." Born, the smell of cinnamon rolls and peach cobbler filled the air. The same recipes I'd once tucked away when I chose to follow Gerald's dreams instead of my own. Life had come full circle. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks earlier. The faithfulness clause worked. Exactly as Sarah predicted. I kept the house, 75% of our investments, and 5 years of spousal support. Gerald lost nearly everything, including the company that once defined him. Tessa left him 2 weeks after the wedding, moving on to another man with deeper pockets. I didn't even feel anger anymore, just relief. Tyler and Olivia helped me paint the bakery, their laughter echoing off the walls. When we finished, Tyler hugged me and said, "Mum, I've never seen you this happy," and he was right. For the first time in decades, I was living my own story. Thank you for watching this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value every story and every voice. Don't forget to subscribe to Tears and Strength and share this video with your friends.